In 2024, is it better to go with Questrade or Wealthsimple? Over the past few years, I've had the chance of using both platforms, among others, and I just made the switch exclusively to Wealthsimple. Let's talk about why. I do want to start with just a general announcement. While it is important to research and ultimately pick a brokerage that best suits your goals, understand that you as an investor can have success with pretty much any of the major brokerages. How you decide to invest, how you ultimately construct your portfolio, and importantly, the habits that you display as an investor over your lifetime, these will have significantly more impact on your success long-term rather than just, getting into the weeds about such and such brokerage. Of course, each brokerage does have its slight pros and cons, and some will be better suited. But I guess the messaging to start this off is spend your time and energy learning on becoming a better investor, and then pick the brokerage that does help suit your goals, fit your goals, and you find most suitable and you're most comfortable on. As a brief backstory, over the years, I have publicly criticized, I don't know if criticize is the right word, but called out Wealthsimple in the past simply due to a lack of functionality. And it was honestly to the point where my brokerage, I opted to go with Questrade and ultimately TD Direct Investing. That's where my money was previously held. Remember that when Wealthsimple launched, this is back in 2014. So they're a relatively new company, in comparison to, let's say, for example, a Questrade, which has been around since 1999, well, Wealthsimple was primarily just a robo-advisor. I remember when Wealthsimple Trade was launched and it was simply a mobile app, they were lacking certain account types. The pool of investments that they offered access to was less or limited, et cetera, et cetera. Well, here in 2024/2025, that is simply not the case. Okay, up on the screen, what you're looking at are just some of the improvements or the new features that we've seen across both platforms. I'm sure I'm missing some, but these are some of the ones that jump out to me comparing the two. This isn't meant to be a slide of a side-by-side comparison of all the perks and features, but what this indicates to me is that one platform, Wealthsimple in this case, they have been committed to innovating and launching new features and fast. Some of these features, I believe, have been driving major benefit for the vast majority of investors. Things like fractional shares, stock lending is obviously a new one, recurring investments, so on and so forth. Whereas the other brokerages, not to name names, but Questrade was what I used, I would argue they're not really innovating much at all. In fact, I would say they're almost moving backwards with some of the new improvements they've aimed to do. Long story short is that in the modern day, Wealthsimple is no longer playing catch up. I think in many respects, they are leading the charge when it comes to brokerage options. Let's talk a bit about user experience and what it's like to actually use both of these platforms. It's kind of funny because the app ratings do tell a big story. We see with Wealthsimple, we see a 4.6 star rating across 125,000 reviews. With Questrade, we cannot say the same in terms of their user reviews. From using both platforms, these reviews are very, very accurate in my opinion. With Wealthsimple, looking at the web portal, obviously a very modern, easy to use experience, kind of pioneered that following some of the big major US brokerages. Questrade has tried to improve their web portal, in many ways aiming to copy Wealthsimple, I believe, but it's just more clunky. For anyone that has used both web portals, you know what I mean. It's just clunky. It's not easy to use. And in fact, what I found myself doing with Questrade was not even using their new design. I would go back and use the Questrade Edge platform, which was a lot more clunky, but it was what I was familiar with. On the app side, this one is no debate in my opinion. Wealthsimple is miles and miles better. This could be seen as a major benefit for those that do a lot of their trading on their phone. The screenshots don't really do it justice, by the way, what I'm sharing with you guys on the screen. But if you've used the apps, you know what I mean, right? Like one of the major takeaways, even though it's just been a few weeks since making this changes, I would actually place my trades on Wealthsimple mobile. So I would actually do my investing from my phone, whereas with Questrade, that just was not something I would do. I would always go to the desktop portal. And again, is that the end of the world? You can make that call for yourself, but it is a nice plus to be able to do things when you're on the go or on your phone in a much more modern way. In terms of support, I would give them both here an equal thumbs up. I think the support has been very good as of recently. This is something that wasn't always the case, but I have a very responsive chat feature on both platforms. You can also give them a call if that's something that you care for. But to the main guts of this video, here are some of the key features that were appealing to me Obviously, it goes without saying, but commission-free trades, okay? This is number one. This is what Wealthsimple is known for. It's what they've been known for. It's very hard to argue with commission-free trades, especially when you are a newer investor or an investor with smaller dollar figures. On that same vein, another major feature is, of course, fractional trading or fractional shares. This is such an advantage for the smaller investor or someone with less money, where you don't have to buy a full share of an expensive stock. You can essentially select the dollar amount that you want to invest and buy a portion of a share. You know, traditionally something you couldn't do. We did just see TD, I believe, launch their fractional trading. So coming along, Questrade has yet to offer this. One of the features that's especially appealing to me in the current day, in lieu of this portfolio changeover that I've done, is of course the ability to do recurring buys on Wealthsimple. So you can really automate and take a passive hands-off approach. Not to say that you can't do this to some extent with Questrade. You can set up a pack, a pre-authorized contribution with Questrade. So every paycheck or every month you have money going into your account, but then you have to manually go in and invest that money. You need to go in and decide where you're going to deploy that. Whereas with Wealthsimple, you can essentially take a completely hands-off approach and automate everything. Last point that I want to call out here is the perks and tiers with Wealthsimple. Okay, hitting the 100K premium tier, which is nice. I'm, fortunately at this position. This is a super nice bonus. You have things like reduced management fees on managed accounts, which FYI, I do have a managed account. We'll talk about that later, my RESP. You get a slightly higher interest rate on your cash accounts. I don't personally use this, but a nice one here is, of course, the complimentary USD accounts. I actually ended up setting this up for my RSP because I own, VOO, as I've discussed in my previous couple videos. These are just some of the features and benefits that I am currently finding attractive for me and my situation. As I always like to say, do your own research, do your own due diligence, and look at your own situation and say whether these things are, as important, less important. You can make that call for yourself. Because in fairness, to do an all-encompassing review, there are areas where Questrade, I would argue, still certainly excel. To go through a few things that may be relevant to you, for one, certain account types are still today more accessible on Questrade. For example, I hinted at my RESP, so my Registered Education Savings Plan for my daughter. I opted to have mine on Wealthsimple despite that being a managed portfolio. So they don't have self-directed RESPs where I can go in and pick myself. I have to essentially plop it into a robo-advisor managed product, which does come at slightly higher fees. If you have deeper needs, such as something like a spousal RSP, well, Questrade offers that. Wealthsimple doesn't. One of the big ones is, of course, the margin account. I actually did see on their website, they're hinting that a margin account is coming soon on Wealthsimple, but you get the point. Questrade does have more offerings as of currently. Another area that they excel in is they do provide research tools, if you will, more research tools. You get access to things like tip ranks and seeking alpha. Not that I would use these in my brokerage, to be completely honest with you, but nevertheless, advantage to Questrade there. If you're somebody that is into options trading, well, Questrade would still give you the advantage there. I personally have no concern for that. If you invest in mutual funds or other types of products like that, Questrade would take the edge there. Again, probably if you're doing DIY investing, you're trying to get away from mutual funds, but there are situations I've seen where you may want to temporarily transfer in your mutual funds for whatever reason before you sell them. You can do that with, Questrade versus you cannot hold any mutual funds on the platform Wealthsimple. But a big one here is that if you have less than 100K, so let's say you don't qualify as a premium client, you're just a regular Wealthsimple user, I would argue that US dollar trading is still better with Questrade, okay? So with Wealthsimple, the USD accounts are not free. Again, that's a perk of being a premium client. As I've mentioned before, one of the things I really like about Questrade is the ability to have those US dollar accounts, and it kind of homes your currency very, very nicely. This is less important to me now, where I'm not trading as much US stocks, whereas before I was like 80%. Well, being able to have that US dollar currency, and when you're buying and selling, not getting hit with all too many additional currency conversion fees definitely can be a more optimized way of doing that than paying a lot more conversion fees, currency conversion fees that is, not commissions, with Wealthsimple. And of course, if you're interested in doing things like the Norbert's Gambit, which you guys know my opinion on that, I don't have the time or energy for that. Questrade would take the cake. To summarize and give you guys my up-to-date thoughts and takeaways, again, do your own research and due diligence. But the way I like to think of it is that for your simple investing needs, if you're just your typical kind of simple long-term investor, Wealthsimple is going to have everything you need and arguably more at this point. I think it is the perfect starting point for the vast majority of investors. If you're brand new watching this video, you're like, what do? I would say default to Wealthsimple, especially if you're planning to invest in a passive, simple, ETF investing strategy. You can't go wrong with Wealthsimple. Questrade, of course, does offer free ETF purchases. So again, from a cost perspective, it's not going to be majorly different. But I think when it just comes down to user experience and like flat out, what are you going to enjoy your time on when you're, scanning through your brokerages or using the apps? Wealthsimple is miles and miles ahead, and that user experience alone for me is worth the money. Again, you can make that call, for yourself. One other thing from my personal situation is, as mentioned, I already had my RESP with Wealthsimple. My wife's investments are Wealthsimple, so there is kind of an appeal to me to have everything in one place going forward. If you deem that you're an investor, however, that has or will have more intermediate level needs. So things like more account types, more of those unique style accounts. Certainly if you plan to invest heavy in the US as talked about, if you plan to do options, things like that, of course, well then Questrade very likely will be your best bet. To be very clear, I think they're both awesome options. As I started this video off with at the very top, you can't go wrong with either option. Like, it's not a bad thing if you're using one or the other. They're both great. Questrade is just more of your traditional brokerage where yes, you do pay some more fees, but you also get more functionality. Wealthsimple, as the name implies, is simple. And I do believe that here in 2024, for the vast majority of investors, it's gonna have everything else that you would need. But you can make that decision for yourself. Like I said, at the end of the day, it's just a brokerage, and how you invest is gonna have much more of a meaningful impact. But nevertheless, those are my up-to-date reasons why I made the switch here. I'm very excited and very happy with it. I'd love to hear down in the comment section below. Have you guys considered making the switch? What are you currently using? What are you interested in doing going forward? Leave a comment down below. Drop a thumbs up. But as always, I thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.